What is DRY? Dry. What is that? What is that all about for programming? Hello, I'm Chris Athanas. I'm a KMP developer. Tech support said they're coming out to close that thing for sure. And today I'm gonna be reacting to Venkat Subramaniam. I really like his stuff. He's done a lot of stuff in Java and a little bit in Kotlin, but I like the way he's really quick, he's sharp, and let's listen what he has to say about what's about dry.
So what does dry mean? So dry stands for don't repeat. Don't repeat yourself. So that's the very first thing, don't repeat. Well, it's often mistaken, and I mentioned this a few times already myself, it's often mistaken that we are focused on duplication of code. Well, we talk about that quite often, but this is a lot more than duplication of code. So what does dry really say? Dry says don't duplicate, and don't duplicate two things. One, code, so that's the first thing, code, and also effort. So don't duplicate code, don't duplicate effort. Now, when you
Yeah,
duplicate
for
code
sure.
and duplicate effort,
Yes. The code is it's not just the code in multiple places that's that you need to change based on one other change over here. We change one thing here, it changes the other places. We're doing almost the same thing, or basically maybe doing exactly the same thing in multiple locations. Yeah, it's the effort you're changing, and the code needs to be changed. Yeah, but there's also ways of doing. If there's like a bunch of places you have to change one thing in multiple places, you can have it all refer to one. That's pretty good. But then you get all hung up on trying to do that all over the place, and maybe that's when you go too far. And that's where wet comes in. Like, let's see if he mentions wet.
it comes back to haunt
Write everything twice.
us. Duplication of code is something we all recognize very quickly. But let's think of duplication of effort before we come back to talk about duplication of code. Now, imagine for a
Yeah,
minute you have an
this is a definitely better way of thinking about it.
application where you make a change to the database schema. And the minute you change the database schema, you decide that you have to change your HPM file. Okay, you change your HPM file. What's the next
Yeah,
thing?
okay.
I got to
Yeah.
change my model class here. I got to
Right.
change my DIO class here. I got to change my controller here.
Yeah.
I got to change my view here. And then when you're done with all the change, you say, boy, there was a lot of change, but that's life in the big city. What can I do? Well, but where did all the change
Part of it.
start?
So there's oftentimes that is true, but if we can if it starts to happen a lot, we can start to in the next version or some version ahead when we think about the things we're having to deal with, we can reconstruct this thing so it'll make it easier to make these kinds of changes if we're doing it a lot. If it becomes a sticking point, that kind of stuff.
All the change started with a change to the schema. And so that is an example of a duplication of effort. It's not the same code we wrote in each of these places, but it is a different code, but the effort started by making that one change.
Right.
Here is another example. You need to
So that's the whole situation. Is this was the whole thing that Alan Kay talks about in his object-oriented programming approach, which I go into my free class or my free course, how to program from the ground up. But explain the difference between the Alan Kay style and the C++ style that we all think that OOP is. It's not. That's not it. So the whole thing with that was his thing is we should have these things that are like cellular structures, and the cellular structures have membranes. Those membranes are the API, and they might have sub components that also have membranes that are the API to that thing, and that's the libraries, whatever, things like that. So that's the whole point with that was trying to compose these things. So if I do make a change inside here on this part of it, I don't have to go around to all these different other things that instead of using a membrane approach, they have a direct line connection, which improves performance. But this is the issue, right? Where it makes it very difficult to change independent parts and have them still operate. And then you have to so the whole thing about these membranes that get developed over an evolutionary time. These are the things that survive. That create these membranes of these APIs. Then it becomes designing these APIs so they can cover all the cases, right, and still be useful without having to go directly inside it, right? So how to be useful and extendable and changeable and modifiable, and that takes insight into what problem we're trying to solve. Let's keep going.
from a validation on your application. Well, for performing this validation, you got to do client-side validation and server-side validation. Now, clearly, we all can agree, you don't do client-side validation and go home. You have to do both server-side and client-side always if you're going to do client-side, because you can sneak behind this client and get to the data on the server
That's just more things to change, right? That's just how it works.
side. You got validation on both sides. Well,
Yeah.
okay, but on the server side, I got to write Java. On the client side, I need JavaScript. After all, it's two different languages.
With Kotlin, we can just do one language, but the concept is the same. We still got UI code here that's going through some API that has to change. Even if you're having the same language, it's still this API issue. Let's keep going.
What can I do? I'm going to write the code in both places. Well, that's a duplication of effort, even though it's not the same code you are duplicating. And
Right.
it's important for us to take some time to say, how can I capture this, which is exactly what the DRY is talking about. So what does the DRY principle say? It says every piece of knowledge in a system, so knowledge in a system, should have a single, unambiguous, authoritative representation. So
Okay, yes, and that is also the LNK's kind of concept of this cellular structure, where but this thing is like, well, this is the problem, isn't it? The unambiguous part of it. Authoritative means okay, it owns its little thing. That's fine. Representation, that's okay. Representation representing what, how, who, for what reason. But this unambiguous, ooh, that is the promise, isn't it? We want to try and be as unambiguous as possible, try and make it clear as possible what this particular piece of code or unit of functionality is supposed to do. That's the dream. We don't always get there, but yes, I mean this is the angle of the approach. But do we actually ever get there? I don't. It's probably that's never not with humans.
So it says every piece of knowledge, and after all, we are knowledge workers. Every piece of knowledge in a system should have a single, unambiguous, authoritative representation. This was written in the Pragmatic Programmers, a fantastic book if you haven't had a chance to look at it. But
I've not. So let's keep going.
Pragmatic Programmers talk about the DRY principle. We should not duplicate effort. We should not duplicate code as well. Now,
Right. I mean, if we're seeing this happening quite a bit, yes. So that's where the wet. I guess he's not getting into wet. The other side of dry is wet, where write everything 3 times, maybe write it twice, maybe 3 times, maybe 4 times, maybe we write it a number of times. We go, okay, this is an issue here. We have to then relook at our architecture of how we designing our solutions to our problems, so we can then get this thing so we can make it easy to modify and change and update, and don't have to have this long drawn out process that's very painful. Maybe we can make it so it's not painful. Make it so this is a normal way we do business here, which is called an API. Let's keep going.
I remember my painful experience from my past. I was working on an application where a server side, a simulator.
And APIs are developed evolutionarily. I mean, I'm gonna start quit interrupting it, but these APIs are developed not just in one bang, bam, we got it, boom. This will be it forever, boom. No, they're kind of been evolutionary processes. We have to play with them, work with them, say the things that are good, things that aren't good, the things that we thought were going to work great and it didn't, or things that didn't work great, which now we didn't think they were going to work great, but actually are fine. It's just actually awesome. How do you get there? You can't get there in one shot. Bam! You have to. This is an evolutionary thing. This whole thing's been evolutionary the whole time. So to expect it to be not is that's the thing. That's where we get caught up. It's like we just want the solution. It's like, well, no. If we were always changing our minds, something new's coming along, something happens, something changed. Have to go faster, better, cheaper, more fun. Spin off. I don't know. There's all kinds of ways it can go. We can't predict which way it can go, but we can like maybe prepare ourselves for when these things are starting to go in different directions to make it easier on ourselves. Let's keep going.
We should not duplicate effort. We should not duplicate code as well. Now, I remember my painful experience from my past. I was working on an application where a server side, a simulator that I was working with, would choke up and fail when a certain data is sent. And I was eager to make sure this doesn't happen. So I was in charge of developing the UI. And in the UI, I had gone in to verify that this kind of stale, incorrect data doesn't get through. Well, a few months went by. One of the engineers fixed the problem on the server side and tried to enter the data on the UI. Said, sorry, we don't permit this. It's like, yeah, we do. And he filed a bug for fixing it. It took us several months to fix it. Now, why did it take us several months to fix it? Because in my eagerness to solve this problem, I had spread this code across the UI, every single place. And, that's really bad programming. You say, gosh, that's really bad. Well, but isn't that what experience is all about?
Yeah.
Experience is where you do all the bad things before your luck runs out.
Correct.
Right?
So yeah, that's just what I said. These things are evolutionary processes. We want them to be completely done from the get-go, and that's an impossible dream. So how do we make it so, okay, we're probably going to change this. We don't know which way, 100% which way yet. Or maybe we do know which way it's changing, and now we can make a plan to make it so it's just not a life-threatening event where the patient may not make it, where it's just a prescribed, it's just like a chronic illness kind of thing. We have to deal with this every once in a while. Here's your Here's your antibiotic. It's like that level. Keep
done
going.
this and I learned
Or
about this, and
insulin
it, well,
shot, whatever
eventually,
you
like,
want to
that's a
call
really
it.
bad programming, don't do it. And we begin to learn quickly and say, how do I eliminate this problem? Well, create a little code that becomes the validator and call this validator from different places so it doesn't
Yeah,
really become more expensive to change this
correct.
code. So once the
Right. And that's just an evolution process because we didn't really know at the time where we're going to need these things, or if it's even needed, it's just easier to copy it. It's just a little bit of code. It's like not a big deal, right? Until it's like another thing has to put another requirement has to be in there. So the passwords now have to have numbers and letters, and that kind of stuff. Is like, oh, I have to go here and here and here and here and here and here to change this thing. It's like, well, that's when you put it into the validator. So it's that process of like the pains, like this hurts. That's how we get there.
right principle do? It reduces the cost of development. Now, how many times we see
Yeah.
configurations being duplicated? And it's a nightmare. You probably have
Yes.
seen places where you go to configure something and people spend enormous amount of time doing the same configurations in multiple places.
Yeah.
That is a sign when we got too much duplication going on. We got to find a way to write scripts and eliminate that kind of
Yeah. Yeah.
duplication. That's very
Yep.
important.
Yeah, it's usually the pain. You usually have to go through painful process. Give me a like, subscribe, go over and give Dev Tools Made Simple, which I'll leave in all the diddly do below. And I'll talk to you soon.